Hi, class. Hope you've been doing well. So, today we're going to talk about the Olympics. The Olympics were supposed to be this year in Tokyo, Japan, but they've actually been moved now to next year because of the coronavirus and the different things going on. But the Olympics actually started in ancient Greece, which Greece is who we were talking about when we left off from school. So the ancient Greek Olympics, though, were a lot different than our modern day Olympics. So with this assignment, there's this PowerPoint, which I'm going to explain and teach from. And then there's these questions to do, which is posted along with the PowerPoint. So when you open up this page, you're going to need to go to File and then make a copy. And then you can add your name in here. So for example, mine would be Ponder, and then for you, it'll default to your Google Drive folder, and you can make like an NTI folder if you need to, or make like a social studies NTI folder so all your work's being saved there, if that makes it easier to organize it. And then you would press OK, and it makes your own copy of the document, which is what it's trying to do now. So there it goes. So then the reason why you need to do this is like with most of our documents, you have to make your own copy to be able to write into. So since I'm recording, I can't click into the box and type into it, but you'll be able to click into the box and type your responses. So getting back to the Olympics. So you may be wondering who could participate in the ancient Greek Olympics. So, our modern day Olympics, men and women both can participate, and the age doesn't really matter. There's been young contestants in the Olympics that were young teenagers, and I think some even your age, that trained really hard as kids and made it to the Olympics. But in ancient Greek times, only men could be in the Olympics. So, the key is only men could participate. And most of the time, they were actually naked to participate because they didn't want their clothes restricting them. And then, as for viewing the Olympics, only men and unmarried girls were allowed to watch the games, where nowadays anybody can watch the games. They're actually televised, and it's a pretty big deal to watch them on TV at your home and root for your country and different things. So, married women, on the other hand, if they went to the games or got caught sneaking into the games, could be sentenced to death. And politicians from all over the different city states met and discussed politics and economic matters at the games. So the Olympic Games was a time for different groups or different leaders to come together and negotiate and make agreements. So it was a fun and peaceful time. So the next thing you may be wondering is what the winners got. So a herald announced the winner of each event. So you may think of boxing, and you have the referee in the ring and he raises the hand of the champion. So that's what the herald would do, and they would win a laurel wreath, which is this thing pictured here, and then some money and free meals. So it wasn't all too bad. They got money and food, which at that time, food was a really valuable thing. And even today, you need food to live, so food's valuable. So you also became like a hero to your home city. Like it was a big pride and accomplishment to win the Olympics. So you may think of the Hunger Games and how the champions in each of the Hunger Games was honored by their districts. So that covers the who. So now you should be able to answer these who questions. So you'll just type your answers into the box. And if you need to, don't be afraid to pause the video and look back. And so, moving on, we're obviously talking about the Olympics, but what were the Olympics for in ancient Greece? Well, the Olympics were created as a festival to honor Zeus. So Zeus was the king of the gods, and we're going to have a lesson on some of the different Greek gods. You may be familiar with Zeus and his thunderbolt and different things, and especially if you are familiar with Percy Jackson. So there were festivals in most city states to honor the gods, but the Olympics was the most important festival. And the Olympics were so important, in fact, that wars stopped in order for people to travel safely to the Olympics. So a lot of these times, these different city states competed for land and wanted to gain territory. So they would have wars and fight with each other. But during the Olympics, all the fighting stopped. So the Olympics united people. And like I said, it brought them together to make different negotiations and deals. And training for the Olympics made the athletes better soldiers. So we've talked about how Sparta had some really good soldiers. So you can think that the Spartan soldiers were probably good at the Olympics, and getting stronger and training for the Olympics makes them better soldiers, just like our modern day athletes train years and their whole life to compete in the Olympics. So some of the different events, there was 3 different races. There was the stayed, which was just a short sprint that was less than the length of a football field, which was about 200 meters or 600 feet or so. And then there was the dialysis, which was about the length of 2 football fields. So you can think about how big a football field is, and it was about 2 of those. And then the really long race, the Dolichos, which was 5 or 6 miles long. So it was for people that were really fit and stamina, and they ran on really wide tracks, and 20 people could run at a time. So nowadays our tracks are pretty small and only about 7 or so runners go at a time, but in these 20 people could run at a time. And in some events the runners would run an armor outfit that weighed between 50 and 70 pounds. So I talked about in the beginning how generally they were naked, but to make it more challenging for some of these races, like this really short sprint, they would wear heavy armor to make it more difficult. And since they were running 20 at a time, people often ran into each other. So the running wasn't no contact running, like it was kind of similar to a horse race, how the horses may bump into each other because there was just so many people running. So another event did involve horses, talking about horses and chariot racing. So horse races were about a mile long. So we have the Kentucky Derby here, and horse racing's still a big deal in our modern society, and we can trace some of that back to the ancient Greeks and their horse racing in the Olympics. So in some races, the jockeys would actually run next to the horse for the race instead of riding the horse. So this could be dangerous and lead to the jockeys getting ran over by the horses. And then chariot racing, which is depicted here on this pottery, was a cart that they would ride in or ride on, and the horse would pull this cart and they would race that way. And about 40 chariots could participate at once. So again, these chariots often crashed into each other. And going back to the Hunger Games, it was chariots in the second movie and I think the first movie, but they paraded the contestants for the Hunger Games around on these chariots, if you're familiar with that movie. And the owner of the chariot would actually win the prize money. So the driver generally wasn't the owner. So the driver was putting themselves at risk, and they couldn't even win the prizes. So the next event was the Pentathlon, and the winner was the best all around athlete. So if you wanted to be well known and be like the biggest hero in your city, you would compete in the pentathlon. And it comes from the Greek word penta, which means five, and then athlon, which means contest. So there was five contests or five events in the pentathlon, and these was discus, javelin throwing, running, jumping, and wrestling. So modern day track and field has discus and javelin throwing, and we have running and jumping still, and wrestling's not involved with track and field much anymore, but we still have wrestling and MMA, like with mixed martial arts, really popular. WWE is kind of wrestling, it's just for entertainment purposes. So we have all these events today still, and those of you that were in track and things might be familiar with like throwing discus and things. And those were the five events that made up the pentathlon. And then wrestling and boxing in ancient Greek times was still held in stadiums, and it could last hours. So these guys were tough and they were strong, and there was pancration, which was upright, like which was the name of their wrestling, and it could be fought upright or they could fight on the ground. And it was a combination of wrestling and boxing. So, like the picture here, it was more like MMA than just wrestling. And any tactics except biting and eye gouging or poking people's eyes out was allowed. So they could kick, punch, try to break each other's arms. Just think of MMA, and that was ancient Greek wrestling. So men also wore leather straps with metal studs as they boxed. So they essentially had brass knuckles and would wear these as they fought. And they would fight until someone gave up, was unconscious, or dead. And because they didn't want to seem like cowards, a lot of times these fights ended up with either someone unconscious or dead because giving up was weak and they wouldn't do that. So now you should be able to answer the questions for what kind of events happened in the ancient Olympics. And again, don't be afraid to pause the video here, work through these questions, scroll through the slides. It'll be posted along with these questions so you can find the answers to these. So, when were the Olympics held? So, the Olympics were held every 4 years, and the games were 5 days long. So, referring back to our modern Olympics, they are held every 5 years. So, you can see here, like the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, and then here's the 2024 Summer Olympics, 2028 Summer Olympics. So we still hold our modern day Olympics every 4 years as well, but you can see that they last a lot longer than 5 days now because they rescheduled it to July 23rd to August 8th. So our modern day Olympics are about 2 weeks, but in ancient Greek times, the Olympics were only 5 days. So now you can answer the couple win questions. So, where were the Olympics held? So, like we've said, they were held in ancient Greece or in Greece, but more specifically, they were held near what is today Athens, which is Greece's modern day capital, 200 miles from Sparta in a city state called Olympia, which is right here on the map. So you can see Sparta's down here and Athens is over here and Olympia's right there. And that's somewhat how they get the name of the Olympics. And the questions ask you to circle Olympia and Sparta and Athens on the map, which is why I pointed them out for you over here. And then there's the other question. So now there's a short little exercise of does the person belong? So the directions for this are all of these people are at the gate of the Olympic Stadium hoping to enter. Some of these people are there to compete, others aren't allowed in, others came to watch. It is your job to give these people directions about where they should go. If you allow people in that you should not, you could be sent to jail. If you don't allow people in that you should, you could have an entire city state angry at you. So your options are to A, send the person home, B, or A, send the person to the arena seating to watch the games, B, send the person to the training grounds to get ready to compete, or C, send the person home. He could get in trouble for being there and trying to get in. So you have these scenarios and you circle 1, 2, or 3, which is 1 is A, 2 is B, and 3 is C. So you have to match those up. And again, for help on this, you can refer back to this first slide of who can attend the Olympics. So this is our brief overview of the ancient Greek Olympics. As you can see, the ancient Olympics are pretty similar to our modern day Olympics. Few differences are now they're held in different cities around the world, where the ancient Olympics were only held in Olympia. Now, in our modern day Olympics, both men and women can compete, where in ancient times only men could compete. Also, now anybody can view the Olympics, and it's a big deal to watch them on TV, where ancient time only men and unmarried girls could view the Olympics. But the events are similar. We still have a lot of these same events, and we actually have a lot more events than these ancient Olympic events. We have basketball now at the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, we have hockey. We actually created 2 Olympics. There's Summer Olympics and then Winter Olympics for all the winter sports. So we've grown the Olympics and made them a lot bigger, but we kept some of the traditions from the past of some of the different events and having them every 4 years. And Olympic winners do tend to become famous. A lot of people have heard of Michael Phelps, who is a big swimmer, and other famous Olympic people. So ancient Greece introduced the Olympics to us, and we still have them in our modern times, which is why it's important to know the history of the Olympics. So if you have any questions on this activity, you can ask them on the Google Classroom. I'm looking for you to answer all the questions in full sentences as best as you can. When you go to attach the assignment, make sure to add the file before turning it in, and I'll have other videos explaining that you can refer back to. Hope you all can stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you soon.